Carlotta seems to be the obvious pick, I think. Because she's there, she kind of encouraged us to go down, and then went, see? What are you doing here? And other such things. So, morning came and the shores of Hawaii were in sight. The captain approached, regret on his face, his cap in hand. Well, Passepartout, Monsieur Fogg, what is it to be? I believe I have a theory, I replied nervously. The captain nodded briskly. I'm glad to hear it. We will gather everyone together and you can discuss what you have discovered. Why gather everyone? I can tell you now. We must have witnesses to it, the captain said. We all will be judge and jury. We must hear the evidence you have collected, untampered and unprepared, myself included. Monsieur Fogg touched my elbow as we followed the captain to the drawing room as the others were called. Passepartout, please be cautious. We are still under suspicion. Do not attempt to bluster or they will think you are guilty. Yes, monsieur. He nodded and we stepped into the room. Mademoiselle Carlotta was visibly fretting, looking around with clear fear of someone. Monsieur Jaffa leant by the window, his eyes clouded. General Peters looked frankly cross, presumably because of the delay to his journey. I cleared my throat and began to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, I have brought you together because I believe I know who killed our artificer. Of course you know, General Peters said. You did it. The weapon was yours, you've no alibi, and you're a damned Frenchie to boot. Monsieur, I am a valet. I held up a hand for silence. The key to this whole affair was the lack of a scream. The business arrangements of Madame Chou, time of death. I didn't even think about that. That would point probably to Jaffa, actually. I need to think of this. The business arrangements of Madame Chou. Why would maybe she just did it so that she wouldn't get blamed, but it does seem a little odd. But that is rather telling thinking about it. The lack of a scream. We all saw the unpleasant manner of Madame Chou's death, but none of us heard it. I began to wonder how could that be. Oh, and he doesn't like foreign people, and he wanted a bit of adventure. It was no doubt sadly rather brief. That is not the important point, I replied. The killer covered her mouth, Monsieur Fogg said. I shook my head. It is simpler than that. We did not hear the scream because there was another, louder blow that covered it. General Peters sat up sharply. The whistling, he declared. From the engine, I nodded. The captain turned to him with a frown. It's true that when the boat rights itself, it makes a squeal, but it's only for a moment. Not enough to cover a scream. Not enough time for someone to be attacked. Unless it was perfectly timed. Well, perhaps, I suppose, that's possible. The next detail is the time of death. At the time told to us by Monsieur Jaffa, no one has an alibi for their whereabouts except for Mademoiselle Carlotta, who was in her cabin receiving a gin and tonic from the butler. Any of us could have been in the boiler room, bringing Madame Chou to grief. Indeed, Jaffa replied, but what of it? It seems irrefutable evidence, I agreed. I touched her, she was quite cold. Oh, but that's... You have the cold air, don't you? What if she was cold for another reason? That's a good point. Like what? General Peters put in. A cold blast of air. It would have to be a very long, very cold blast, he said. Wind through an open porthole wouldn't do it. I held up a finger for silence. Monsieur Jaffa, if such a thing were possible... then I would not know for certain. A coroner could have said more from the blood, but I could not. If the temperature were not a factor, she could have died at any time. Okay, let us consider the business arrangements of Madame Chou. I saw the captain and Mademoiselle Carlotta exchange sharp looks. Interesting. As you know, the artificer was the inventor of the ship. You may not know she was considering going to business with the good captain, as well as Mademoiselle Carlotta. The captain shook his head. She was going to business with me and me alone. I tried to persuade her, Mademoiselle Carlotta admitted. I tried to befriend her. I would have succeeded in the end, but now there is nothing to buy. And nothing to... that is... No, but there's nothing to threaten her business, but there's still the fleet. So that is cold, Mademoiselle, I remarked. Yes, it is, she said. But you see, even if I am unfeeling, I have no reason to murder anyone. Neither does the captain here. So then there is the personalities we see in this room. What would a valet know of the human mind, eh? Much less than the mind of a murderer. I don't know about Monsieur Jaffa. Most fixated, most calculating. You're mental. General Peters is a bit mental. But I don't think he did it. I'm wondering if it was the captain at this point. Captain's most fixated. I am a captain here. Would you rather I was scatterbrained? So then this is what we have discovered. The watching faces were silent. I believe I see, Monsieur Fogg interjected suddenly, a hint of a smile on his lips. You are suggesting the murder did not occur when Monsieur Jaffa believed, but later. A blast of wind cooled her down. Is that your theory? I told them about the steam valve in the engine room, and how, when it squealed open, it had pumped cold air across the room floor. With enough gas released, I believe it may be enough to cool a body sharply, while also making a loud enough noise to muffle a scream. This crime was committed by someone who understood the engine, I agreed. Someone capable of blocking the valve to build up the cool air and pressure inside in order to release it with a loud enough noise they could commit their heinous act in secret on this tiny boat. And they plan to cool the body and confuse us about the time. That is most cunning. They are our most cunning agent, I agreed. With no small knowledge of the workings of the ship. Are you not? Captain Kiaka. The captain shook his head. If I had wanted Madame Shu dead, I could have killed her any time in the last 10 years. But before then, she had not made you angry. Passepartout, I loved her. Oh, what? Passepartout, I loved her. Ah. Random nonsense. Yeah, so why are we only hearing this now? A lot of empty nonsense, I fear. Passepartout, Captain, we had an arrangement. You may arrest us. Cannot do it. An English gentleman is above reproach. But someone must we be to blame, I declared. Indeed, someone is, and Madame Shu was my friend. I encouraged her to make this craft. I funded her experiments. I allowed you passengers on board. I should have helped to keep her safe. She was more valuable to me than you may realise. You could not... So was it Madame Carlotta? It's one of the two. Or possibly the General. I think... Yeah, I obviously didn't know enough. No one could have foreseen some... No, you could not have known you had brought a murderer aboard. I'm still ignorant now, but Madame Shu is gone. This boat is forfeit, my captaincy too. I cannot have you two arrested, there is no evidence. Any of my crew might have done it equally well. I fear we will never know. I looked to my master, but he bowed his head. Today I will be letting a murderer walk free, but there's nothing else I can in conscience do. With that, he left the cabin, and in somber spirits we disembarked. Madame Shu's killer was never brought to justice. My own suspicion that it had been a complex artificer arranged suicide. No. Okay, now I think it's the General. Had been responsible, was left unproven. That's annoying. I don't like the fact it just jumps and gives... Oh, here's some random evidence. Lima, Panama. Panama, Salt Lake City, and San Francisco. We're headed to San Francisco anyway, I think. So we could head to Panama City, or we could head to San Francisco. Let's just head to San Francisco now, I think. Actually, unless there's anything particularly... Yeah, that was what I was going to get, because that's... I'll trouble you not to play that Damien accordion in my presence again. There we go, and it looks like we've got all our stuff covered. So I think that's a little frustrating that the fact they go, okay, here is this quite important piece of evidence that just isn't given to you. Probably was General Peters thinking about it. We boarded a steam barge from Honolulu to San Francisco. The scent of ripe bananas pervaded every plank of decking and bulkhead, a sweet and deliciously rotting odour which offended my trained senses so greatly that for many months after I could scarcely look a banana in the peel. Yes. Greetings, Captain. Passepartout, take my arm a moment. What can you tell me of San Francisco? Spanish town, not so long ago. Salt Lake City is actually the key one. Then to Albuquerque. Can be reached from... do you have any children yourself? I believe Albuquerque can be reached from Salt Lake City by the rail cart. No, I'm not sure I want them. I've always wanted a large family. This one's my first. Albuquerque, then to Houston. It's something I do know. The city has grown to cover the region of the Buffalo Bayou. Dallas. My father worked in Albuquerque on the day that Texas and Pacific Railway to Dallas suffered a fire. Then from Dallas. Do you realise the quickest rate to Dallas from here is through Salt Lake City? Yes. Marrakesh from Dallas. Yeah. Dakar. Well, okay, well. So what do we learn now? We learn... Yes, but we already knew those, so... We've not actually gained anything particularly new there, have we? Yeah, we're quite a way behind my last run. Ah, I huffed, attempting to convince my mouth that I ate fried kippers and potatoes at breakfast. Everything smells of bananas! Monsieur Fogg replied that he could not smell a thing, which I took to be his queerly English sense of humour at work. Still, if bananas were to be the worst of my troubles aboard this boat, then that wouldn't be no bad thing. Actually, I should probably shouldn't, just so I can click that button. Yeah, so we're in Dallas. Oh, we've stopped in Dallas for a little bit. That's probably not going to catch us up, but it will mean we're not going to be too far behind. We're not going to do it in 60 days, but we might be able to do it in 80, which of course is the aim of the game. I woke in the middle of the night convinced that someone was in the cabin with me. I stayed very still and listened. There was a long wave-lapped silence until I heard distinctly a dragging shuffle. I opened my eyes and looked up, my heart beating impossibly loud in my chest. In the darkness I saw the sheen of a pair of eyes gazing vacantly into the distance. "Monsieur Fogg!" I cried, and my midnight visitor blinked and straightened, and looked about my cabin in genteel surprise. "What?" he said calmly, pulling his dressing gown closed. "Am I doing in your cabin, Passepartout?" You would know better than I, monsieur," I exclaimed passionately, rather upturned by his sudden appearance. He took a sharp breath. "It seems I have been sleepwalking," he said, his voice almost tremulous. "I have not done so since I was a child. Please accept my apologies." I let him take his leave, though he seemed strangely agitated. Pulled the thin blanket over my body and settled back into bed, hoping to find my way towards sleep before dawn. Our relationship with Monsieur Fogg deteriorated slightly. Wait, what did we get? Oh, we didn't get anything. Captain Kalani was a heavily pregnant Hawaiian woman who found Monsieur Fogg's English accent a source of great mirth. "Say something else," she demanded over breakfast. "Please, Monsieur Fogg." I distracted her with some idle talk, and my master cast me a grateful look, all in a day's work for a valet of my unimpeachable calibre. Wait, what news do we get? Fogg said to have crossed the date line, but will extra day be enough? I think so. I think we'll get the 80. I don't think we're going to cross from San Francisco to London in 5 days, so that 60's out of the question. The fourth day aboard our passage passed quietly. Captain Kalani moved slowly around deck, her profile jaw-droppingly large. "When are you due?" "When we dock," she breathed, "and not a day before, I should hope." The blush in her cheeks belies her excitement. It is a marvellous thing. We're not going to make it from San Francisco to London in 4 days. 24 we may be able to do. 9 in the morning. Some of the positions to be sold. So we could just get the train to Burlington, but I don't know if there's a route from Burlington to New York. I wouldn't want to then go down to New Orleans market. So we can sell some of our... right. We can sell that. I'd rather not sell that. We can sell a timetable. Dallas, Acapulco, New Orleans. Chicago, Winnipeg, New Orleans. A lot of New Orleans things, so... But we don't need a huge amount of money at this point. We could get that, but I don't think it's going to be particularly... The thing is, you're then forcing yourself down a particular route as well. I think I will get that though. I like the idea of a harmonica. Where does that sell? Chicago. Actually, we'll try and head to Chicago. They both sell in New Orleans as well, so it doesn't really matter. Ah, no, I didn't want to do that, did I? Alright, so I can head down. I don't want to head down. San Francisco seemed less a city, more a ravenous beast bent on consumption of everything, even of itself. Within the ever-expanding city limits, the building works made it tricky to talk to anyone. Such was the infernal constant noise. I sloped towards recently constructed Long Bridge, which was crowded with families out for a stroll and people fishing for silvery smelt with long poles. In the water was a jangle of rowing boats racing each other and boatmen taking passages out to Mission Rock. Cheers and good-natured shouts emitted from a halfway house in the middle of the bridge. I peered at the halfway house, and surmised from the revels I saw spilling out from its doors that it was some manner of drinking den. A man red-faced and somewhat the worse for drink bumped into me. I excused myself politely, and he made an apology in return, slinging an arm round my shoulders. "Oh, hello," he exclaimed. "You don't sound like you're from around here." "You do not sound American either," I retorted. "No matter, I was Dutch once, in a past life, but now I am as American as President Grant. This is a land of newcomers. You are a prospector?" "I am a traveller," I said. "I am travelling around the world." "Oh yeah? And I'm a Navajo chief." "Actually," I leaned inconspiratorially, "I'm a jewel thief on the run. If you don't want to tell me, that's your business. You don't need to make up tall tales." A brown-skinned woman slipped her arm into his. I looked for an introduction, and the man smiled quickly. "Ah, my manners. I am Anders, and this is my wife, Jenny." "A pleasure to meet you." I kissed her hand. She was surprised, but smiled. "Always a pleasure to meet Anders' friends." She looked askance at the whiskey flask in his hand, but seemed to find me unobjectionable. I hesitated, the obvious question about her origin on the tip of my tongue. I swallowed back the question, though clearly with a visible effort, for she laughed with a full-throated pleasure. "I am of the Modoc tribe, what the New Americans call Indians." Jenny rolled her eyes. "I do not mind your surprise. Most of my tribe has been taken to the Klamath Reservation in Oregon." "What is a reservation?" Jenny looked at me with utter astonishment. "They are tracts of land where the first peoples were relocated, and I don't know what I just did." Where the first peoples are relocated when the whites decide they want the gold, the silver, the coal, the buffalo in the homelands. Anders whispered something into Jenny's ear and she laughed, though I feared I had opened an old wound with my prying questions. I nodded and found my way back to Monsieur Fogg, who was sitting drinking tea with a disconsolate frown. "It tastes like soap," he remarked, but would say no more. We can still get... Oh, we can go to San Pedro. I don't want to go to San Pedro. I mean, that would force us to go to Albuquerque, but I could go another way, I think. What do we have? We have Chicago, New Orleans. Right, actually, I could go to... Chicago's after Burlington, isn't it? Up from Burlington. But then you go down to New Orleans. So I think we'll just head to... Oh, I've already looked at these. So we will rest, I think. We'll pass the night here. Yes. I headed towards Chinatown to eat. It was a warren of crowded wooden and brick houses, temples, businesses, herbalists, laundries, and market stalls selling fruit and flowers. I was interested in conversation, so I decided to approach an older man in European clothes, who offered me a cup of green tea when I introduced myself. "Thank you." I breathed in the herbal aroma, and gulped the hot tea down quickly. "That is most generous." He chuckled and smoothed his crisp shirt. "Many of my friends, they say, 'Lynn, you talk to foreigners, do you wear their clothes?' And I say to them, 'I am American now, and you are too.'" He pointed at a young man with his hair in a queue. "Look at him with his old-fashioned hair. There is a law against it here, but he wears it like that, the fool." "What a ridiculous law." "But that is your tradition. Why is there a law against it? It hurts no one, surely. We must let go of our old culture. We are American now." "But you are Chinese American. Why should you give up everything for the American dream?"